What is the most WTF thing you've ever seen happen at a wedding? So, a male relative of mine got married. His mother died a couple of weeks before the ceremony. And well, his widowed father showed up to the wedding with his new girlfriend who was wearing the dead mother's clothes. I'm talking about the dress she picked out for the wedding, her shoes, and her jewelry. Our whole family was shocked. They spent the whole day telling everyone they saw that it would have been a shame not to use it, since it was such a happy coincidence that his late wife and new girlfriend shared the same size. Needless to say, the groom loves his wife, but doesn't like to talk about the wedding. Next story. I attended a wedding reception where the waitstaff started to become generally distracting during dinner. They were sweeping the floors, spraying windows, creating more of a mess than anything. They would ask guests to move, interrupting their conversations and meal. They would clear away bottles of wine and champagne that hadn't been finished, then quickly bring another just to grab it away again. One of the waiters even sat down and poured himself a drink. It was confusing and a bit appalling, but not as much as it was amusing. Turns out, though, they were the hired entertainment. It created quite a bit of buzz and conversation once we had all processed what was happening. I've never seen anything else like it. Next story. This actually happened. DJ'd a rich family wedding, 400 person on their massive property, under a huge tent. The rich daughter married an indigenous Canadian gentleman, and it was easily 45 OC with the humidity that day. Got heat stroke setting up. Boss told me to finish or I was fired, and figured it was my last gig because I was done at that point. Now, seemed like nice enough guy. They looked like an adorable couple. Bride's dad was a total condescending jerk to staff and me the whole day and evening. Overall, there was an obvious tension throughout the night, though. At some point, someone on one family side said something to someone else about 1 a.m. and a massive brawl started. This wasn't teenagers, but like 40 to 55-year-old people, white bankers throwing down with stacked farm working and reservation living people. It was wild. And you're going to ask, did I cut the music? Hell no, I was fed up, felt like ass and saw an opportunity, so I threw on kung fu fighting and watched this brawl go down. Multiple cop cars, like 7 to 10, multiple arrests, didn't get paid, don't care, worth it. And the rich dad may have gained a son, but he definitely lost that fight and a few teeth that day. Next story. I was once invited to a Nigerian wedding held in the UK. I arrived at the church about 20 minutes early and it was locked. No one there. After a few minutes, a couple of other guests arrived. After about half an hour, a guy arrived to unlock the church and a lady started to set up flowers. Easily over an hour after the supposed beginning of the service, other guests started to arrive. Then the bride and groom. Then as the service went on, including well after the bride and groom had walked down the aisle, guests continued to arrive and shuffle about the church, taking their places, saying hello to other guests, etc. At the end of the service, we all had to drive about 30 minutes to a reception elsewhere. We arrived there a good 2 hours before the wedding party. After the event, the bride realized that she had sent the same invitation to her English and Nigerian guests and asked what time we got to the church. Apparently, guests are traditionally so late to Nigerian weddings that it's usually to put a false start time on them, which in turn leads to everyone else intentionally getting there well after the time they're given. However, though, the real WTF moment was at the reception where the bride and groom danced as guests approached one by one to shower them with money. Make it rain style. Again, apparently not unusual at a Nigerian wedding, but not 100% what I had expected. It was a great wedding, though. It just would have been handy to know when to get there. Next story. Was invited to a coworker's wedding. My coworker was the bride, and she was a really funny, no bullcrap New York kind of girl. The priest who was supposed to officiate the wedding was an old family friend, but he fell ill, so they had to send out another priest to do the wedding ceremony. The ceremony starts, and the new replacement preach launches into this 15-minute long sermon about how, according to God, the woman is supposed to be subservient to the man. This is not the bride's vibe at all, and all of us are sitting there simply just stunned at what the priest was saying, waiting for the bride to snap and punch the dude in the throat. To her credit, she just stood there and listened, but you could tell she was furious. And I'll never forget the scene immediately afterwards as the bride stood there crying and a bunch of family members had the priest basically cornered, chewing his ass out for ruining the wedding. First off, everybody, hello, how are you? You know, things have just been crazy on Underspark. But I want to say that once again, we have returned with a wedding video. This is what the people want. This is what I want. And I am the people. I am also the narrator, and I am so excited to read this video. Anyway, next story. So, I attended my cousin's second wedding with my grandparents and my mom. I was 12 years old. It was a fancy event. My cousin, the groom, sang to the bride. His bandmates performed during the night. When it was time to leave, my cousin wanted to walk our grandmother out and help her get into the car. I was already in the back seat. My cousin said he forgot to kiss me goodbye, so he opened my car door and slipped his hand under my dress and grabbed at my privates as he kissed me. I was in total shock. Even if I told my mom, she wouldn't have believed me, and for years after that, I was dodging his advances at our family events. When I was 50 years old, I decided to tell my mom, and no surprise, she just kind of shrugged it off. Next story. At my wedding, one of the caterer attendants decided to take my husband and his groomsman offer of a few swigs of whiskey before the ceremony on the side of the building. The attendant was younger, at least 21, but not much older, and was drunk AF. He then got fired and decided to join our reception party and get more drinks. He jumped in front of all of the guys to catch the garter, and I was really upset at the time, but I found a candid photo of the moment that he caught the garter, and he did a whole-ass air kick and was so disheveled that it made me laugh. Next story. I knew a girl who did photography on the side. She was hired to shoot a wedding on the Gold Coast, Australia. The Gold Coast, it has a reputation for having very beautiful beaches, but very trashy people. Think Jersey Shore types. Anyway, the bride, groom, bridesmaids, and groomsmen are all getting ready in the same room. The photographer I knew was told the boys had their bucks party, bachelor party, stag do, the night before, and they were still a little drunk. They decided it would be a good idea to do some cocaine to try and wake up a bit. Also, by some cocaine, I mean a lot. The photographer is trying to get some nice photos, but it's hard when there are illicit drugs in every shot, and the men are too rowdy to sit still. So she tells the bride that it's a little difficult to get decent shots. So the bride asks the boys to stop taking drugs for 1 minute. The groom yells, "Shut up, idiot," and just keeps snorting. And then his groomsmen just laugh. Next story. I was back home to MC my young cousin's wedding to his very uptight bride about 15 years ago. She's so uptight because her family is certifiably insane and she clings desperately to normalcy like it's a life raft. Sometimes she clings a bit too hard and cracks under the pressure. Well, the groom's dad and the bride get into a screaming match at the rehearsal. The minister refuses to move forward with the wedding until they do some emergency on-site counseling. The rest of the wedding party is asked to leave. We wait for hours across the street at a coffee shop until we're told to head to the reception venue. We had a dinner scheduled and were supposed to finish decorating. The bridal party and family finally show up just as the staff is about to lock us out for the night. We've had no dinner, no rehearsal, and the reception isn't set up properly, so I leave and meet an old friend for a late dinner. The next morning, I arrive at the church not entirely sure there's even going to be a wedding. We do an impromptu rehearsal with the minister, and I head down to the basement to use the washroom before the guests start to arrive. There's a weird, sickly, sweet chemical smell down there. I walk into the ladies' room and find the bride's father with a crack pipe in his hand, settling his nerves, I guess? And this sets the vibe for the rest of the day. Now, the ceremony, it goes surprisingly well, and we head to the reception. The hotel had just opened that week. This is the very first wedding they've held, and they've clearly have not been trained and are not ready yet. Only one elevator is operational, and the staff isn't really trained. So then the elevator broke, and the staff couldn't figure out how to get the food down from the kitchen to the ballroom, so they just stopped food service halfway through the meal. The DJ played the wrong song for the first dance, and the bride broke down in tears, ran out, and didn't come back for an hour. The bartender kept setting up unlimited shots along the whole bar and leaving open bottles for guests to take, many of whom haven't eaten. Now, I, the MC, start projectile vomiting because both my friend and I got horrendous food poisoning from our dinner the night before. I was in a long gown and would go upstairs to a bathroom away from the party, undress, puke my guts out, redress, go back to complete part of the itinerary, and repeat. Then, in the meantime, everyone who wasn't violently nauseous was getting absolutely hammered. The night culminated with my uncle punching his pregnant daughter in the face because she wouldn't give him his motorcycle keys to ride away drunk. He then fell into a large sculpture and smashed it, causing the police to be called. He, of course, tried to fight the police. The wedding was then shut down because of the excess drunkenness just before midnight, and I went back to my parents' place and threw up for 3 more days. And before you ask, yes, the bride and groom are still happily married. They have 3 kids, she dresses them like little Instagram models, and is a wannabe mom-fluencer. They make TikToks. Next story. Not particularly WTF, but I thought it was hilarious. At our wedding, there was a lot of booze, and an excellent time was had by everyone. A friend of mine, about 25F, had had a skinful, went upstairs to find a quiet bathroom to have a tactical vomit, came back downstairs, and as she was halfway down the stairs, she tripped. rolled quite gracefully down the stairs, continued rolling when she got to the bottom, and stopped a few yards when she bumped into my mother-in-law's legs. My friend was lying flat on her back, and being the well-brought-up girl she was, looked straight into my mother-in-law's eyes and said, "I'd just like to say, what a wonderful wedding this is. And didn't the bride look beautiful?" And then she passed out. Next story. Long ago, I worked at a banquet hall and witnessed a fully NASCAR-themed wedding. During the reception, they played the audio of the proposal going out over the PA at the track. It was fully unintelligible. Bzz, gabba, gabba, bzz, vroom. Other highlights were the owner locking himself in the office to avoid the bride's father because he was threatening him to haggle on the costs. But in the end, we had to call the police because the bride in gown climbed over the bar to steal more sweet, sweet MGD after we'd closed the taps and the event was over. Next story. My wedding. 2 things. 1 godbrother. So, 1, blew out a candle at the table super hard, causing the wax to blow back in his face, land all over his mustache and beard where it had hardened on his face. Everyone who saw it laughed, and no one attempted to help him remove it. He was too drunk to notice. 2, went next door to the empty conference room and pissed on the track where the wires were plugged into the floor for the equipment. The idiot, he thought he was in a really nice bathroom. We were at a resort in Mexico. I thought he was going to get arrested, but they were cool, just took him back to his room. And he remembered nothing the next day. Next story. Happened to my girlfriend, now wife. Good friend's wedding about 25 years ago. We were young and loved to party. Bride and groom, they left the reception early to head out for the honeymoon. A group of us took mushrooms and were drinking hard. Close friend was a huge wrestling fan, like WWF. He was dancing with my girlfriend, and out of absolutely nowhere, he grabs my girl, picks her up, and legit suplexed her on the dance floor. Her head hit the floor and she was lying there in a spaghetti-strapped LBD with her eyes fluttering. I put both my hands around his neck and tried with every ounce of strength I had to choke the life out of him. Friends eventually calmed us down and he was escorted home. But it was the most insane thing I've ever seen in a wedding. So, my fellow wrestling fans, I have to say I hope the wife is okay. It seems like it if she's still around 25 years later. But I have to say, she took the bump. She sold it well. She might have a future in the business. I'm just saying, if this was the one-winged angel on concrete floor, she'd probably be dead and she wouldn't even kick out at 15. But that didn't happen and she lived to tell the story. Good for her. Sign her, Vince. Or no, wait, Hunter? Tony? I don't know. Who signs people anymore? Anyway, next story. Bride had 2 maid of honors, 1 matron, 1 maid, and groom had 1 best man. Groom has anxiety issues, but an all-around awesome human, as is his wife, the bride. So now, the maid of honors, they knew to keep the speeches short, as groom would rather party with his bride and everyone and keep the spotlight off of him. Both maid of honors, they gave lovely speeches. Then came the best man, who then passed the mic to first the GM, who then proceeded to pass the mic along to the others. The bridesmaids started freaking out, and thankfully, the fathers of the couple got up and did a quick, "Thanks for coming, we love you both, let's eat and be merry," and wrapped it up because what should have been maybe 10 minutes tops between the 3 speeches was going on 40. I know this isn't the worst one out there, but 40 minutes of speeches when you're hungry and the bar runs out of water and soda, so you are left with very little patience. Next story. My cousin's wedding reception. I was about 9, so my mom took me and one of my brothers home before the real fun started. While I was there, the maid of honor was absolutely hammered before entering the fire hall, grabbed a $500 bottle of rum that was supposed to be raffled off to help with the couple's honeymoon, and proceeded to chug a good third of the bottle. Then had some rando teenager from the bride's family, I'm related to the groom, try to hit on me for most of the reception because he refused to believe I was as young as I said I was. I've always been pretty tall. But what I wasn't there for, but heard about in the morning, DJ's extremely inebriated ex-boyfriend showed up and harassed him, the DJ, for most of the night. Guests were fine with him until they started verbally screaming at each other. Then my also extremely inebriated family tried to shoo the ex out and eventually got him outside the fire hall. Ex took a swing at someone, pissed off my drunk redneck cousins who took swings back. And ex, he runs right into the road, gets hit by a car, and flies into a ditch. He was okay though, minus a broken arm, bruised ribs, and was screaming about my homophobic family ganging up on him for no reason. Next story. I-34M caught the Garter and a 16-year-old girl whom I did not know caught the bouquet. A bunch of the wedding guests were loudly pressuring me to get up under the girl's dress and put the Garter on her leg. She was maybe a little on the spectrum and didn't understand what was going on for a minute. Then when someone explained to her what the people were yelling at me to do, she looked like she was going to faint from shock and horror at the idea. ya. I was like, absolutely nope, and gave the garter back to the bride. The put it on her leg contingent was mostly boomer-aged ladies. Next story. Everyone's going to say a fight, and those are very much WTF. However, the fight I witnessed was between a man and a woman. Sure, notable. However, the woman had a previous career as a mud wrestler and had since moved on to bodybuilding. Also, the man she was fighting was her brother, who was 3 weeks out of rehab. You may have witnessed a fight at a wedding, but I witnessed an ass-kicking the likes of which I have never seen. The woman took him down and beat his ass brutally and decisively, in heels and a tight dress. When the cops came and both were being dragged off in cuffs, she was able to get herself, in heels mind you, out of the main hall, down the front stairs, and into the cruiser, with absolute grace and form. Her brother had to be carried with occasional drops of blood-soaked tissue falling off behind him. Next story. Everybody in the ceremony was standing on a raised platform, like 4 feet off the ground. One of the groomsmen, the bride's brother, was standing with his knees locked. In the army, they tell you not to do that because you end up fainting. And, well, he fainted and toppled off the platform. He landed on his head, concussion, skull fracture, broken orbit, and cheekbone. Other messy stuff. He got taken away in an ambulance. The rest of the bridal party got into cars and went to the hospital in full wedding regalia to sit in the ER waiting room. I don't remember the timing, but it must have happened after the impressive clergyman said, "man and wife," because the wedding happened and they're still happily married. Oh yeah, and brother is fully recovered. Next story. My cousin, the bride, has some kind of disease. Nothing immediately terminal, but I think it's one of those things where you slowly deteriorate, unfortunately. So, when she was getting married, they wanted to make it a huge event. My family is scattered across the country, but we all made sure to make it there, especially since my aunt and uncle put so much time, work, and money planning into it. So, we're all at this fancy country club with at least 200 people, and halfway through the party, the bride disappeared. After a while, I go to the bathroom, and there she is, puking her guts out because she was taking shots of tequila since the morning when getting ready for the day. She never recovered that night, so the toasts were never made, and the cake had no cutting ceremony, and my aunt and uncle were understandably pissed. Then, when I was my best friend's maid of honor years later, I made sure to monitor the bride's alcohol intake just in case. Next story. I might be late to this, but I've been working hotels for almost 20 years. Seen a lot of weddings. One of the craziest was a really redneck one, but they had an open bar, so problems happened. One family insulted another, and it wasn't even an insult really, it was over a football game. Little guy was talking a lot of smack and this big guy just grabs a bottle of beer and whacks the little guy across the dome hard. He goes down and it happened so fast. Big guy realized he effed up and runs away with his girl. About 30 minutes go by and the cops finally come. The ambulance guy said he was pretty much dead instantly. Cops take statements. Later that night, while we were cleaning up, a detective comes by and rips out the carpet. They eventually catch the guy a few states over, and I had to do ID him. And again, this was one of the crazier ones. I'll have to tell you about the serial killer next time. Next story. I conducted a wedding at the bride's parents' house. It was where she grew up. The garden backed onto a field. The bride had told me that she asked the farmer if the cows could be in the field on her wedding day so she could see them, and he was happy to oblige. Day of the wedding, I'm there as early as you do, and I see the farmer moving the cows into the field. I move away from the marquee to look at the cows, and the farmer comes over to the fence where I am. He says to me, all pleased, "The wife and I are invited to the reception." And I tell him that's lovely, and I'm sure he'll have a great time, and I mention how pretty the cows are, and he goes, "Oh, bride wanted them in the field for the wedding, and I said to them, 'Ladies, you've been invited to a wedding, you gotta look your best.' So I power hosed them, and I thought that was absolutely hilarious and brilliant." Next story. At my sister's wedding reception, I was at this banquet hall where another wedding was also going on. The place was split in half, so 2 events were happening. The 2 sections were sealed off, but smokers went outside, and after 5 hours of open bar, we started mingling. I went to their side, and some came over to our side. And all was fine until some college football rivalry thing broke out and the guests started fighting. People were getting glassed, tackled, stomped, etc. My sister's side was a bunch of drunk Penn State bros versus I can't even remember the rival team. We had to call several ambulances. I have no dog in the fight, but just went to their reception and was delighted that they had a sushi chef and better liquor. Made a lot of new friends that night though from watching them go at it. Those college football bros are dumb AF in my opinion, but I admire their dedication. Next story. I was a wedding caterer. The venue I worked at had a strict rule about no outside alcohol. I worked with my mom and she noticed that the groom and groomsmen were extremely intoxicated very early on in the day. She went in their rooms and found a bunch of moonshine and put it behind the bar, but it was too late. And so the groom had to be helped to the altar to marry his pregnant wife. Poor thing. After dinner, I was clearing plates and I walked outside where the groom immediately hit on me. I was 16 and just turned right around and went back inside. Next story. The bride's mother showed up, refused to sit at the table she was assigned to, and rearranged some seating to accommodate her other daughter and herself. She ensured she was at the table closest to the exit. She refused to talk to the groom's family and gave dirty looks to the bride's father and stepmother. She loudly exclaimed that the turkey that was served was the fries and most overcooked thing she'd ever eaten, and the wine selection was atrocious. She doesn't even drink wine. Then, the second the bride's father got up to make a speech, she got up and silently left, taking the bride's younger sister with her. 2 weeks later, the bride, the groom, the groom's mother, and the bride's grandmother all got nasty letters about how disgusting the whole event was, and that she was ashamed to be acquainted with them. I was the bride. She was my mother, but now she's just Kathy. Next story. I was at the DJ at my friend's daughter's wedding. The parents were divorced and nobody got along with the ex-wife. Wristbands were handed out to people that were able to get free drinks at the bar. The bride's mother didn't get one because everyone knew she was unstable. She shows up, tries to get a free drink, and gets denied. She then tries to pull the "Do you know who I am" card. Still, no free drink. Now, I am not sure what happened next, but some arguments started. Pushing, shoving people, moving outside. I see the mother trying to drive away and someone reaching through the window trying to choke her with the seatbelt. Next story. I did wedding photography for like 5 years, and these ones, they stick out. The bride that refused to have her photos taken, didn't want to be there at all. Mother-in-law put it together, and she did get married. Then there was a wedding on 11/11/11, most requested date ever, and the bride no-showed to the wedding. Another time, I go in the bathroom at the church just as people start to arrive, pee, wash hands, walk out as a relative. An aunt, I believe, goes into the restroom. When she exits, I went back in to check my clothes or makeup or something, and that woman crapped in the toilet and left it there at the beginning of the wedding, so all of her relatives could smell it. I flushed it, it wasn't clogged, but she's just demented. Another time, extremely long, entire mass during a wedding. A bridesmaid fainted. Don't lock your knees, that's not a myth. Then vulgar games, absurdly drunk grooms, one time a bride and guests, and one time a male videographer was told very clearly, many times, about staying away from the woman's side of the venue because it was an extremely religious reception where women would be removing their hijabs and partying together. Well, this MF walks completely around the venue to the woman's side and walks through as the bride is standing there, uncovered. On her wedding day, he saw her like that. So rude. Also, this same wedding was the only time I saw a dowry being paid during a ceremony and in the ceremony. The women didn't participate. The husband and father signed a paper and talked, and the bride just sat there across the room. They seemed like a very nice couple, though. Next story. About 15 years ago, I catered a weekend-long wedding. 2 rich families making their kids marry to join the business together or some such. The groom really didn't want to. He was in love with someone else, but his parents pressured him into doing it. After the wedding, dinner, and party, the bride and groom went back to the hotel. He packed his bags, drove to the airport, and left the country. When his parents finally got in touch with him the next day, he told them he went through with the wedding like they wanted, and now they could F off because he wasn't coming back. None of the guests were told. When asked where the bride and groom were for the rest of the weekend, everyone was told they were busy, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but all the staff knew. The families, though, spent over $750,000 on the wedding. Church, decorations, food, venue, rental, flying over 200 different guests in, and then paying for their hotels. Next story. I was a +1 to a wedding about 2 years ago. I went with this guy I was seeing, and it was one of his buddies he played baseball in college with. We were at the back table by the bar with his other old teammates. During the best man, maid of honor speeches, the maid of honor was talking about a deceased family member. I couldn't really hear because at our table, one guy vomited all over the pregnant girl next to him, and they were fighting. Another guy and his date were making out, and he was hands all up in her dress, and one guy was talking on the the phone loud as hell. I was so embarrassed and I didn't even know these people. I smacked my hand on the table and said, "Have any of you ever left your homes, ever?" After that, me and my date just kind of lingered around and stayed away from the table. But I can't believe people actually act that way. Next story. 1. I owned a sound company that did over 200 weddings a year. I have a wedding coming up on Saturday. On Thursday, it gets canceled. The bride is boning the best man. Oops. No problem though, the new couple who don't want to lose any deposits, they book their wedding 2 months later. The reception starts with everyone going to their seats, no intermingling. They eat their meals without a word. Then after the first dance, there is a stampede to the front doors and the place empties. I was tearing down at 10:30 p.m. instead of 1 a.m. Then another time, a groom disappears with X until 12:30 a.m. When he returns, well, you can guess what happened. The next day, bride files for divorce, and I quickly deposited the check. Next story. A co-worker's wedding at a very nice country club/golf course. Her friends, a couple male and females, early 30s maybe, dropped acid at the reception, started throwing glasses and yelling at random people. The chick tried to drive off and the bride's dad tried to stop her. She hit both cars next to her and he finally pulled her out of the car. She tries biting him, so he pins her down until the cops arrive. Cops get there and demand he release this tiny girl. The dad does so, and she runs to bite the cop. He pins her down and she's screaming and kicking and spitting. That was the craziest crap I've seen at a wedding, and I still tell that story. Next story. Many years ago, I worked for a catering company. It was a position I had for about 10 years, and there were many things that happened during that time at wedding receptions that were beyond the normal. Let's see. Once I accidentally walked in on the groom banging one of the bridesmaids in the ladies' room. They didn't even bother to shut the stall door. Another time, I caught one of the bridesmaids giving one of the groomsmen, not her boyfriend by the way, a handy behind one of our high-top bars. The bartender had taken a break, and they seized the opportunity to hide a little. A very, very little. They stopped when I walked up, and the woman somewhat apologized as she wiped her hands with the bar tablecloth. Yes, it was quickly removed. Then there was the reception where one of the groomsmen had a tiny video camera mounted to the top of his shoe and was sticking it under the dresses of any woman he could get close to. He was eventually escorted out by the police. Then there was the wedding where the grandfathers, both in their mid to late 80s at least, of the bride and groom apparently hated each other. Everyone tried to keep them separated through the evening. At some point, though, they ended up at the bar at the same time, and it turned into a slow-motion World War III. They were throwing the slowest, lightest punches, but still ended up on the ground wrestling until they were dragged apart. Lastly, there was a huge wedding between the grandchildren of a mafia boss from Chicago and one from New York. We had never seen so many people, non-law enforcement that is, discreetly packing in one place. The older boss guy said very little, even to each other, but every little hand gesture meant something. Their security, or whatever you'd call it, knew exactly what a finger raise or snap meant immediately. The room was split with each family staying away from the other family. They didn't speak or mingle until both grandfathers gave a little hand gesture. After that, it was like one big huge family party. So I don't know which of those last two stories there that I liked more. The fact that those old guys probably had beef for 50 years, and even as slow as they are, it's still on site, or the mafia wedding. It reminds me of that episode of Psych where some guys try to shoot up a cop wedding and they get blasted, and they're like, yo, they're packing. And he's like, it's a cop wedding. They're all packing. Moral of the story, don't shoot up a wedding. Anyway, next story. So, best friend from growing up got married on an extremely hot summer day, probably around 1:05 when the reception started at 4 p.m. Some poor old lady in the crowd had a heat stroke, but it's okay. The bride and groom were both medical students, as were about half of their friends in the crowd, and another 30 doctors and nurses were at the wedding. So you had this massive gaggle of doctors and nurses all trying to help out this poor old lady before they realized it was better to just let 2 ER doctors handle it and went back to snacking on past appetizers. Next story. My childhood friend has borderline personality disorder. We always got along because I just accepted it and she felt comfortable with me. 20 years later, and she is still a complete psycho with men she dates. She lands a new broadcaster and then he left her because of her craziness, so she stalked him and his new fiancé for years. Now she's a racist elementary school teacher dating a trucker, but constantly sending me messages about how her stalking of the other guy is going. I'd go over to hang out, but it was still the same psycho behavior she did 20 years ago. The wedding was in a barn. She acted like a normal person and acted happy. There was zero drama from her, but it was just so jarring, surreal. The mother-in-law had a breakdown because she knew the crazy her son was marrying into. but the bride was acting like she was the star in a romantic comedy. It was just disturbing. Next story. The groom's mom was suddenly laying down at the base of some steps on the dance floor, screaming bloody murder, yelling, "My hip! My hip!" Someone calls 911, and everyone's falling over each other to see if she's okay, except for her kids and the bride, who are all furiously rolling their eyes at each other. Turns out, this is just one of the many things that she pulls when she isn't being the center of attention. She took her ambulance ride, got her x-rays, and was completely fine, but was very upset that they kept the party going without her instead of canceling out of respect for her injury. Let me tell you, I have never seen someone more stubborn to keep a party going than that bride. She even opened the bar up for the rest of the night since the faker was footing the bill. Next story. When I was at a wedding reception for my now ex-in-laws, the groom got extremely drunk. The bridesmaid thought it was a good idea to get him to stand on a chair in front of the head table and strip. His groomsman got him as he was getting naked and caught him as he was pulling his boxers down with his pants around his ankles. They grabbed the waistbands of his boxers and held them up, tipped him over onto their shoulders, and carried him out. We didn't see him for the rest of the ceremony. The bride was furious at her bridesmaids and was screaming at them while they were laughing about it. Next story. I used to have an office in the county courthouse, and there were always a couple of courthouse pastors hanging out taking turns marrying folks who chose to have their ceremony there in the rotunda after getting their marriage licenses. One bride and groom turned up with a small group of friends and family in full wedding attire. Bride in a lacy white wedding gown, bridesmaids, flower bouquets, tuxes for the men, and formal gowns for the women, the whole 9 yards. They got their license, made arrangements with the pastor whose turn it was, and off to the rotunda they went. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and friends and family gathered around the couple to congratulate them. And then, an absolute brawl broke out. The bride started chasing the groom through the rotunda and down the main courthouse hallway while shrieking and beating him with her bouquet. Rose petals were flying through the air. Women in formal gowns were throwing punches, pulling hair, and grappling with each other on the marble floor. Men in tuxedos were alternately trying to break up the fight between the women while throwing punches at each other. It was wild. The groom, though, eventually made it to the doors at the under end of the hall and ran outside, followed by the bride, now beating him with her bouquet and denuded rose stems. The rest scrambled to follow, helped along by courthouse security who were responding to the melee. The pastor was watching all of this go down, though, with his jaw hanging. I mumbled something like, "I don't give that one long," and he responded with a sigh and said, I think I'm just going to do them a solid and forget to register this one." Whereupon he opened the record book he carried with him and drew a line through it. I've always wondered what happened to them. It was certainly the shortest marriage I've ever seen. Next story. Well, I don't know if this qualifies because it's not really crazy and I thought it was awesome, but I attended a wedding and for the food they had a modest/small pasta buffet, which was fine. When it came time for cake, they revealed a large stack of maple bar donuts, which just so happened to be my favorite. I thought it was rad, but others were kind of perplexed. But the kicker was when the night ended and you walked to your car in the parking lot, they had hired a hot dog vendor. And not just some guy with a grill, a legit hot dog vendor that you wouldn't find in a big city. He had all the fixings. It was the best wedding I've ever seen, but I don't think everyone appreciated it as much as me. Next story. 1960s. The bride had indulged in one too many bleach and permanent wave sessions, and her chemically deep-fried hair broke off 1/8 of an inch from her scalp a couple of weeks before her wedding. Undaunted, she bought some wigs and proceeded with her very formal wedding. However, as she was almost to the altar with the flower girls and ring bearer preceding her and 3 young nephews carrying her lengthy train, the train wranglers got into a shoving match and one of them yanked on her veil. Yes, dear reader, the veil that was firmly pinned into the wig that was covering 1/4 of an inch of stubble. Wig and veil go flying backwards. Train wranglers start yelling at each other to deflect the blame. Mothers of train wranglers swoop in to grab up their offspring. The flower girls and ring bearer keep bearing and flinging petals. The waiting party is struggling not to pee their pants, and the bride makes a 180 turn, retrieves her wig and veil, stuffs them into her head, and finishes the ceremony only slightly askew. It was marvelous. Next story. The bride found out the groom and his best man were doing heroin together. She made an F-ton of money and was pretty attractive, so you'd think she'd call it off, but nope. She banned the best man from the wedding, so the groom asked another friend of ours to be the best man. He agreed to set up a whole bachelor party and everything. A few days before the bachelor party, the bride calls the new best man and says that he needs to move the bachelor party to the next week because the groom has a test on Monday. The dates have been confirmed months in advance, and Monday was Memorial Day, so the new best man said no. Well, the bride flipped out on him, saying some stupid crap about how he didn't want the groom to be successful in life. And the new best man just laughed and backed out of being in the wedding. He called everyone at the bachelor party and told them to bring their SOs. Best damn bachelor party ever. We had a ton of fun. Then, as the wedding itself approached, they asked the new best man if he was coming to the rehearsal. And he just said, "Rehearsal? You treated me like crap as a stand-in best man. I'm not coming to your effing wedding at all." So the rehearsal gets there, and it's just sad. It's clear that the groom is on lockdown for obvious reasons. His mom, at one point, she was always kind of a wild one, is drinking and asked why nobody threw him a bachelor party. And we're all just kind of chuckling and looking away. Then the wedding gets there. And right before I'm about to walk down the aisle with one of the bridesmaids, she looks at me and says, "If they ask if anybody objects, will you say anything?" And I laughed and said, "Probably not." And she said, "I'll object." Then we had to walk, and I can't say I blame her. The wedding itself, though, was interesting. They didn't allow alcohol during cocktail hour, which was weird. Our table nicked a few bottles of champagne and kept us all topped up. We were drinking a lot, and so was the groom's mom. Then it comes time for the mother-son dance, and she was effing wasted. She starts going on a rant of some kind, and it's just wild to hear. They end up kicking her out of the wedding altogether. Fun times! But anyways, after the wedding, the groom tried to get me to give him $30 for the ties he'd made us wear. I told no, as it was obviously a ploy for drug money. I analyzed what had happened in our relationship in the past. He's always been kind of a narcissistic a-hole, and decided I should just cut him off. I guess we'd been trying to help him if he wanted to get off the junk, but maybe that was naive. However, since then, I haven't really talked to him. Only heard updates. They had a kid. He hit her at one point and went to jail. She bailed him out. He was caught prostituting himself to old ladies for drug money. He got off of heroin at one point and switched to steroids, then back, or maybe to both. They regularly post to Facebook about how amazing their life is. The first best man, he died of an overdose. So yeah, not a crazy single event, just a crazy wedding. Bride, if you're out there reading this, I hope you're doing okay. Groom, get off the junk, man. That crap killed your dad. Don't let it kill you too. Next story. At my brother's wedding, there was a guest on the bride's side who got absolutely plastered drunk and stayed that way the entire night. Well, after the venue moved us out of the reception area and into the hall, they had a buffet table set up for us. The guest in question was still wasted beyond repair and was next in line at the buffet table. She passed out and face-planted directly into the table. Broke the table in half, broke some of the equipment that was being used to serve food, ruined all of the food, and knocked over a wall that nearly fell on top of the bride. And if she, the bride, had been standing like 2 feet over, probably would have ended up in the emergency room that night. Next story. Apparently this is a cultural thing, but basically the groomsman picked up the groom at the reception above their heads, where he's basically laying flat in the air, while pushing him up and down, and then walking around in a circle. Then they took off his socks and shoes, dipped his toes in the wedding cake, and then made the bride lick off the cake. It was so disgusting. And obviously they didn't serve the cake to the guests from that part of the cake where his toes were, but I still didn't have any because I was grossed out. My mom was friends with the bride and told her that she shouldn't have done that, and it was rather degrading. Next story. Pales in comparison to some of the responses, but one was a 20-minute long prayer by the bride's grandfather at the very end of the ceremony. It was December in Delaware, and the ceremony was outside. Everyone was freezing. At the same wedding, the bride's dad made a speech where he apologized for working all the time while she was a kid and missing her childhood, and then said he was so happy she was marrying a man exactly like him. And then, well, less than a year later, they are separated because her husband works all the time, was never home, and he was jealous that she made more money than him. Yikes. Next story. The night before my own wedding, we were playing Monopoly, and I caught my brother's wife cheating several times and called her out. I never explicitly said she was cheating, but let it seem like I thought it was a simple mistake and left her a way out to avoid drama. Well, she didn't like that and grew more rude to me as the game went on. This went on until everyone was tired of the tension because, she was cheating, and we decided to end the game early. She declared herself the winner, and as she had the most money at the end, and was gloating about how she always wins. I told her there was no winner since we ended the game early. Well, this sent her on a tirade, calling me all kinds of names and cursing me out, and she had to be physically dragged away, kicking and screaming by my brother. The next day at the wedding and reception, she refused to interact with me or my new wife at all, although I did overhear her make rude comments about us taking too long with pictures. The day after, when everyone was leaving the cabin we had rented for the event, she still hadn't spoke to us and honked the car horn at my brother to hurry up when we were to say our goodbyes. Another thing that just kind of adds to the kind of person she is, though, she wore the loudest hot pink latex, I think, dress I have ever seen for the wedding. We hadn't put out a dress code for anyone, but for the wedding party, But man, did she make us wish that we had one. Next story. I worked at a wedding venue one summer, so I have stories. But the most WTF thing I saw was the event coordinator getting pissed on by the bride's father. The venue was 2 stories with a balcony. The balcony overlooked the parking lot. The event coordinator was watching a female employee walk to her car at the end of the night. The bride's dad was out on the balcony and decided he had to piss. So he whipped it out and started pissing on the cars below and the event coordinator. I was on the lower floor cleaning up from a separate event and saw it happen through the windows. Next story. Well, my sister's 3rd wedding was a picnic at a fire hall with a groom who had a waist-length ponytail festively braided with leather by the bride to match his do-rag, and a larger middle-aged bride with a wide-open décolletage and no bra, which no doubt facilitated her giving a lap dance to a guest later on and unintentionally and unironically twinned with the groom's best black ceremonial Ride Free t-shirt. We all watched breathlessly for the groom's fake teeth to fall out again, and I met a nice couple the bride introduced me to as the ones that were there the night she first picked them up. Unfortunately, the groom's father couldn't be there, as he was in jail awaiting a trial for a murder. His wife. Next story. At one wedding, someone got super drunk and fell backwards into a very large glass window. Floor-to-ceiling windows and 6-ish feet wide, maybe? Window broke and a giant shard came crashing down and just missed the guy. But the way he was laying there, no one could tell initially, and we all thought he might have gotten impaled like some horror movie scene. Then another wedding, it was actually the wedding next door that this happened at. The men in the wedding party all had fancy walking sticks and canes. The groom got so drunken he couldn't find his, so he started accusing his groomsmen of having stolen it and had a huge fight broke out between all of them. Cops were called, huge scene. The father of the groom ended up being so stressed from it all that he had a heart attack or something, and they had to call 911 for an ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. The cane? It wound up being in the bridal suite where the groom had stored it earlier so he wouldn't lose it. Next story. The groom's grandfather died at the start of the reception during cocktail hour. The bride was a doctor, so there were many doctors there who immediately jumped in and were yelling and trying to save him. We weren't sure if he was choking or what, and they wheeled him out on a stretcher. They ushered everyone to the room next to us to sit down for dinner. The groom's mother, daughter of the deceased, came up to us during dinner and said we needed to help make it the best party ever, so we got our asses out on the dance floor and the band was absolutely amazing. And it was, weirdly, one of the best receptions I've ever been to. We found out the next morning, though, that he had died of a heart attack. The mother of the groom still had the next day brunch at her house, which I thought was weird, like no one would have been offended if you canceled that. Next story. The bride and groom were recent graduates of a very large southern university. They lived and breathed the Greek system, and half everyone who attended were former fraternity brothers and sorority sisters. I don't know why they were crazy enough to schedule their wedding during the game time, but the ceremony overlapped with a major rival. So half the males in the church had some type of earpiece as they listened to the football game. Unfortunately, everyone was glum as the home team was behind in the game, and the glum wedding procession arrived. The bride and groom were in place as the minister began the ceremony, and immediately after, dearly beloved, a cheer broke out amongst everyone, followed back by some thumping and arm pumping as the home team pulled out the win. The groom left the bride's side to find out what happened. Then the groom told the groomsman, and then the bride who told the maid of honor. The info spread amongst everyone, and the wedding suddenly became a joyous event. And the minister wouldn't start the ceremony again until he got the score. The reception was like a game day rerun. The bride and groom, they didn't mind at all that they were secondary to the SEC. When I left, they were discussing bowl game projections. Next story. I was invited to a wedding in Sweden in the late 80s where both bride and groom came from Finland. After church, we all drove our cars for 10 minutes to another location for the feast. But instead of going inside, everyone stayed by the cars for at least an hour drinking homemade liquor, singing and having grandest of a time. Over 100 people in nice clothes, bride and groom, kids and all, mostly Finnish people. We all went inside together singing and sat down, ate and sang. They served plenty of food but only little wine. No drinks or shots, so they saved a lot of money this way. And nobody was drunk or fighting. Not a WTF moment, but surprising for sure. I loved it. It was the best wedding I ever saw. Next story. My wife pleaded with her mother not to invite her brother's family, as they always cause problems at family events. Well, she didn't listen, and by the end of the night, my wife's female cousin had broken my wife's brother's nose. Threw a chair at a sliding door at the vineyard we were married at, too. Her male cousin got caught trying to steal wine in the cellar at the end of the night and had a fight with the waiting staff. He was then bitten by a police dog as he tried to evade police in the vineyards. And then, to top it off, when we arrived at our accommodation, at the end of the night, us and a few other guests were told to find somewhere else to stay, as the female cousin had torn up her room after getting bail. My wife was devastated, and to think I was worried a couple of my mates might light up a doobie. Next story. So, I used to do wedding photography, so had plenty of WTF moments, but my absolute favorite was cringy more than anything. The couple was incredibly disorganized. Didn't think about how to get back wedding party to church or venue. Bride was so late that the priest was on the verge of canceling the whole thing. There was tension between guests, so people were being kept apart. And then the reception? She just comes in, sits at a piano that someone wheeled in, and did a very, very poor rendition of Wind Beneath My Wings while sobbing and wailing every time she hit a wrong note, which was basically every other note. Both groom and guests just sat there gobsmacked. Next story. I used to DJ and did many weddings and receptions, and I thought I had seen it all. Until one night before packing up my equipment, I decided to use the restroom. When I walked in, the light was off, so I flipped it on, and what do I see? The bride and the best man right there on the bathroom floor going at it. Not in a stall trying to be sneaky, I mean right there on the floor, as soon as you walk into the bathroom, and I guess they figured nobody would turn the light on. Now, you may be asking yourself how I handled this situation. Well, I did what any good-hearted person would do. I stepped over them, took a piss and stepped back over them, washed my hands, and headed for the door to pack up my stuff. Got paid, and then got the F out of there. Don't worry, I flipped the light back off for them on my way out the door. Not my chair, not my problem, if you know what I'm talking about. Next story. I worked at an event hall for weddings all through college, and I saw so much. Grooms hooking up with maids of honor in the bathroom, brides having red wine spilled all over her wedding dress by a drunk uncle, DJ getting trapped in an elevator while Timber by Pitbull played on repeat, child of the bride being pissed about a new stepdad and pulling the fire alarm, mother-in-law doing an uninterrupted 20-minute speech about how much she hates her new daughter-in-law, somebody throwing up in their wine glass and continuing to dance, lots of injuries, calling the cops, EMTs, and fire department on multiple occasions. I could go on for hours. Next story. Bride and groom were both longtime friends of mine. They had an open relationship where each of them could and did fool around with other people. Most of our friend group knew this and were like, whatever floats your boat. Now, one of the guy's side pieces was good friends with the bride, and she was a member of the wedding party. Cut to a few hours into the reception, booze was flowing. I look over to the dance floor and see the groom and side chick grinding and making out in full view of everyone. I can guarantee you that while the friends knew about their open relationship, it's a pretty good bet that the bride's grandma, parents, and the rest of her family did not know. A few of us went over to the groom and pried them apart and had to ask him what the F made him think that particular moment was a good time to let the entire family know that they are effing other people. Next story. I was a wedding reception DJ. The first problem was the groom's mother didn't want to announce the name of the ring bearer because he was an illegitimate child. Second problem was reception didn't have an open bar, but the hotel bar was about 20 feet from the hall. That allowed alcoholic groom to be absent from most of the reception, as well as most of the wedding party. Groom got sloshed, argued with bride's parents. Bride was present during a reception the whole time, by the way, and they were arguing about something. Then decided to spend the rest of his time at the hotel bar. His best man finally got him to dance with bride for their song, which was a sad and unenthusiastic affair. Groom refused to dance with his mother. Father-daughter dance went terrible as the father of the bride lectured her about how crappy the groom was being. We played one song with curse words in it and was told if we did it again, we wouldn't be paid. The maid of honor, drunk, told us the bride just wanted to have fun and requested a Lil Jon and East Side Boys song. She said not to play the edited version. Bride confirmed. Considering the bride was having the crappiest of crap weddings, we complied and we played the song. Eventually, we felt the wrath of religious conservative parents and ended the night early because most of the wedding party was hammered and residing in the more fun hotel bar. Bride, however, paid us our full amount, said she was sorry for her father's threats and the behavior of her severely inebriated husband, who at that point had to be escorted into his room. We packed up and left as fast as possible. Never did a DJ wedding again. Next story. In the early 90s, the coworker of one of my parents was desperate for wedding guests because no one wanted to come. He was marrying a mail-order bride from Paraguay, only it wasn't the woman he had been corresponding with. It turned out she was already married, and the family had sent over her cousin instead, who this guy had never met. Y'all, she didn't speak any English, and when the creeped-out minister asked if she even understood what was happening and if she was there of her own free will, she couldn't answer. The minister refused to perform the ceremony and made them and all of the guests, all 7 of us, leave. Somehow, their legal marriage paperwork had no trouble getting through though, but the church ceremony was over before it even started. Next story. Friends of my wife put on a wedding for their daughter and future son-in-law. The family was extremely wealthy with multi-generational winery and vineyard ownership. Groom was a literal piece of human fecal matter though, just a complete redneck moron. And you see, he grew up in a very developed metro area, but was convinced that he was some kind of wild hunting outlaw, always in the paper for torturing and murdering protected animals. Anyway, in our area, and likely most other areas, you can hire deputies through the sheriff's office to staff, guard, monitor private events. It's an off-duty detail to them. Well, the family hired a dozen of them, which was weird to me, but whatever. The whole event was just a crap show to begin with. The actual reception was an hour behind, with everyone standing around sweating their faces off. It's summer in Florida. But anyway, I start to hear a commotion. Apparently, a friend of the bride showed up that the groom had apparently banned from the event. The bride didn't listen to his commands and apparently invited this person anyway. The groom goes ballistic, starts kicking tables and other decorations over. He runs off towards the woods and starts kicking and punching random pine trees. The cops, they run out there to try and calm him down, and while they're doing so, the bride's father runs out there to console him, when the groom decks his father-in-law right in the face. The cops throw the groom to the ground and cuff him. The family talked to the cops and talked them out of taking him to jail, and the wedding continued, uneventful with the exception of the father-daughter dance. The poor father's eye was swollen shut, made for great photos, I suppose. Then continuing, as you could probably guess, they're divorced now. But first, not without bringing two other humans into the world that are now living in a broken home. The groom is in the county jail, awaiting sentencing on a slew of charges, some of which include ding ding ding, domestic battery. The moron joined some local criminal biker gang and got caught with weapons and drugs, so he'll be writing letters from the penitentiary for decades to come. Next story. After party at a Reno brothel. Both parties, this was like their second or third wedding. Middle-aged, just them, and us as the two witnesses. He was ex-Navy and she was a stay-at-home type. He convinced his wife that Mustang Ranch outside of Reno was a bar to get drunk at, so we all went. Awkward start though, hanging out at the bar, getting mildly hit on by the staff, already a weird relationship I myself was in, but soon after we ended up taking a tour of the place, and the bride bought some crazy shoes off of one of the working women. Then on top of all of that, he rolls through a stop sign leaving, and we get pulled over. Probably only got off because he was a Department of Corrections employee, but needless to say, the weirdest wedding I'd ever attended. Next story. Redneck trash family members of the bride come in from out of town, and at the reception, a man and woman thought it'd be a great place to start stripping and start pleasuring the guy off through his pants while he was snaking his arm up her extremely short jean skirt that he was slowly raising above her hips, all while children were running around. I would have been mortified if someone did that at my wedding. The bride, though, just laughed it off and said, "Let them. They're cousins. It doesn't matter." I begged to differ, but whatever. Not my monkey, not my circus. And I made my exit. Next story. The priest had told the photographer no flash photography. Towards the middle of the ceremony, a flash went off. He paused, went on, and then another flash. He stopped the wedding, walked to the back of the church, and started choking the photographer. Absolutely no one knew what to do. He stopped, calmly walked to the front, and finished the ceremony. This was my cousin's wedding in 1996, and I have a VHS where you can see the priest stop, leave the front of the church, a cut of everyone in the audience turning around and gasping, and then calmly walking back. I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't witnessed it myself as a 14-year-old bridesmaid. Next story. My friend's dad and stepmom got married at a local church in our small town. Church was packed. The doors were open during the ceremony on account of it being a beautiful summer day. Priest had just finished speaking about the importance of fidelity, love, etc., etc., the bit right before a couple exchanges vows rings. This brief pause in the ceremony was suddenly punctuated by a loud male voice saying, "Love? What do you know about love? You killed my dogs!" Suffice to say, everyone in the pews whipped their heads around to the door. The poor couple and priest just stood there looking shocked. Lo and behold, standing in the church doorway was our town's local token, mentally unwell, lives in the bush dude. Let's call him Bob. Now, while it is true that the local town council had apprehended and ultimately euthanized Bob's dog due to chronic neglect and abuse, he kept them chained outside all day, and they didn't look very well fed either. But not sure why he felt the need to saunter into the middle of an ongoing wedding ceremony and kill the mood. Gonna attribute that to the mentally unwell aspect of Bob, especially since no one in the church was affiliated with town council. But anyhow, I vividly remember the bride's father standing up with a murderous look on his face, and two men grabbing him before he could get to Bob, who wisely chose to skedaddle at that point. The ceremony continued on, albeit pretty awkwardly after that, and the reception, it was great though. Next story. Bride and groom were having their previous minister of their church officiate. My friend and I were asked to ensure the current minister couldn't get in. Well, he showed up, looking pissed, and started coming towards us. I'm 5'10" and very stocky. My friend is 6'5" and even bigger, both wearing dark suits with ear mics, friend's idea, and sunglasses. So yes, we went full cheese of it. Current minister got one look at us and spun on his heel and left. And then, actually probably more WTF, but not really a huge surprise, was the bride throwing a drink in her brother's face, then almost getting into a fistfight with her mother over the whole thing. Groom had to get between them to break it up. Next story. I used to work at a venue that hosted a lot of weddings. The worst was when the father of the bride and the groom got into a drunken brawl. I guess the fight started in the bathroom as one of the porcelain toilets was broken. Big crack down the center. The fight spilled out into the reception hall, hug grappling and throwing punches. The mother of the bride was trying to break it up by throwing beer on them, which only made things worse, and it turned into a family against family affair. We had to call the cops, but the fight dispersed before they arrived. The bride was devastated and inconsolable. Bride and groom, they left separately, and the aunt, who was collecting decorations the next day, told us they were getting divorced. What the hell happened in that bathroom? Next story. I was a wedding photographer at the time at a wedding in Mexico. The bride and groom were a friend of a friend, so I knew them, and it was a destination wedding at a resort there. Many of the guests were friends of mine. I was gathering the immediate family of the bride together for a photo after the rehearsal dinner, and the bride's father groped me on the way over to be in the photo, in front of his wife and 22-year-old daughter, the bride. Everyone cried except me. It was a very dramatic moment, and he tried to say it was an accident, and it wasn't, by the way. His hand went all the way inside my pants. But like, what? The effing audacity of this man. Next story. The dress code was coat and tie, so some dude who was an uncle of the bride showed up wearing a lab coat and stethoscope. He would only refer to himself as Dr. Feelgood, easily 10 years after the Motley Crue song came out, proceeded to get hammered, shoved the lead singer of the band off stage, and started singing loudly about whatever song had been previously playing until he was ushered out by security. It was an open bar too, and this joker still managed to clog 3 urinals with airplane bottles to the point that they would not flush. It was epic. Next story. I attended a wedding where there was construction going on outside on the grounds within view of the ceremony and reception. It was noticeable, but honestly didn't detract from anything since the venue was on the water and there was still a beautiful view if you looked past the construction area. But I can understand if the bride and groom were disappointed that it was going on their wedding day, if it wasn't expected. Anyway, the events manager went around and gave everyone a glass of champagne for the toast. Normal thing to do. There was a cash bar, so it was nice to receive a free glass of alcohol, but didn't think twice about it. And she lets everyone know that the bride and groom are getting this for free because of the little construction outside, and rolls her eyes. She repeats this at each table so everyone knows the bride and groom aren't paying for it. It was so odd and unnecessary to say. Next story. My ex-girlfriend's mom was getting married and we attended together. My ex's sister was also in attendance. I'll call her T. T proceeded to drink far too much and go completely insane. After drinking too much, T left the venue after arguing with her mom/the bride, then took off her shoes and ran into the woods behind the venue. Myself, my ex, and various relatives went out looking for her. They eventually found her and she was still crazy, yelling at her mom and causing her to cry. After the family calmed her down a bit, she was dumped on us to get her home. The entire ride back, T kept trying to unlock the door and jump out of the car while my ex kept locking it repeatedly. After getting back, T repeatedly tried to assault my ex, so we locked her out of the house. She then disappeared, and we ended up calling the cops since she was still out of her mind. And no one else from the family was around to help. The cops eventually did find T trying to break into the neighbor's house, and she ended up spending the night in jail. Turns out the neighbor had a gun loaded and ready had she been able to break into their house. She quit drinking after this happened. Initially, she was very apologetic, but then started to blame my ex for calling the cops after having to deal with the legal fallout of all of this. Next story. I was in a wedding band for a while. We used to do the song Shout, and then after that part where everybody gets lower and lower, we would duplicate the part from the movie Animal House and yell, "Everybody do the gator!" If you're not familiar, everybody lays on their back and kicks their feet in the air. Well, during a particular wedding with some insanely hot bridesmaids, I yell, "Everybody do the gator!" And the bridesmaids all plop down and throw their legs into the air. And not one of them was wearing underwear! I was so stunned that I stopped playing my guitar, but the bass player stopped playing too. The drummer and keyboardist couldn't see what was going on, so they kept going and were yelling at us to keep going. but I was lost. Bass player and I looked at each other like, I can't believe this is happening. Best gig I ever had. Next story. My cousin's first wedding, formal church wedding. Grandmother of the bride shows up in a gold lame blouse and stretch pants. Grandfather is wearing a white button-down short-sleeve shirt and pants with suspenders, then takes the boutonniere he was given to wear and shoves it in his shirt pocket. My aunt, who is the groom's mother, and her second husband insisted on singing at the ceremony. My dad's older brother is sitting next to me, and while they were singing, Uncle leans in and says, "When we were children, Mom took us to the taping of a TV show in New York City. The MC asked if anyone could sing, so your aunt sang 2 choruses of How Much Is That Doggy in the Window. If someone had told her how much that damn dog cost, we wouldn't be suffering now." And I tried so hard not to laugh. One couple showed up in matching red shirts and jeans, and their child was wearing a red t-shirt and shorts. Uncle told me he was at the rehearsal that he had to remind the groomsmen they were in a church and needed to take their baseball caps off. Then at the reception, my cousin and his wife entered the hall to the WWF theme song, "Let's Get Ready to Rumble." Dad, uncle, my grandmother, her sister and brother-in-law, their son and his wife, and I were sitting at a table next to the DJ. And you've never seen 8 heads turn so fast to look at the DJ. He shrugged his shoulders though and said, "It's what they requested." The wedding, it was on Mother's Day weekend. Come 4th of July, new wife leaves my cousin because marriage wasn't doing what I thought it would do for me. And they had been together for 3 years before getting married. Found out later she was diagnosed as bipolar. Next story. During the last song of the night after a beautiful wedding, the bride's mother stepped on the back of her dress and ripped it. The bride turned around, and the first person she saw was the best man, and she absolutely went off on him. The entire wedding went dead silent. Everyone was uncomfortable and started leaving. The bride then locked herself in the bathroom and wouldn't come out until everybody, especially the completely innocent best man, was out of the venue. She got driven home separate from her husband and made him sleep on the couch. By all accounts, their marriage is doing just fine, but I doubt anybody who was there that night has forgotten how she acted during closing time. Next story. I officiated a wedding for former friends. Everything was set up on a lovely little amphitheater halfway up a mountain. The bridal party was doing hair and makeup and whatnot at a cabin on top of the mountain. So, long story short, the bride was 3 hours late to her own wedding because she wasn't satisfied with how her hair dye had turned out the night before, and demanded the friend doing her hair strip the dye, redo it, and then style it. Because we were on a mountain, there was no cell reception, and she didn't bother to send anybody down to the wedding site to say, "Hey, we're running a bit behind." Well, my friends, we have made it to the end of the wedding video. They are always entertaining and fun. I didn't do as many commentaries this time around, but I am pleased with how many wrestling WWF, WWE references were in this video. That made me happy. And honestly, if somebody wants to come down to the D-Generation X theme song at their wedding with their bros, go for it. Why not? And if you're not down with that, I got 2 words for you. Bye-bye.